Let's turn now to the government shutdown. We've all been talking about it all week long. It affects millions of people. Michigan is losing $18 million a day. But let's look beyond the shutdown and the debate over the Affordable Care Act. People are talking more about the nastiness in Washington, the no compromise, the ugliness in politics. And is what's happening in Washington, is it also that same ugliness here in Michigan? So I just want to start off with the conversation of, is this the nastiest or the most partisan that we have been in a long time?
No, I mean, it's always thus. And every time we get to this point, we act as if the seams are coming apart. This is politics, and it's a messy, nasty, ugly process to watch, but it does work, and it does eventually lead to positive action or at least results. I mean, this is no worse today than it was during the Clinton years when they were trying to impeach a president and calling him everything, and government was more or less stalled in its track. They eventually got through it and got things done. At the end of the Bush presidency, you had Nancy Pelosi standing up and saying, we're not going to work with him, we're going to disregard him, he doesn't matter here. This happens in Washington, but we get through it and eventually we get things done.
All right, so you say this is politics, this is how it works, and it's a process, but I think there are Americans sitting, or people sitting here in Michigan and saying, this is proof that it doesn't work, that this arguing now has come to such a point where you can't say, wow, I was wrong, or else you're just run out. You always have to be right.
Well, I mean, there's no question that the shutdown is a failure of stable governance, right? If you can't operate in the government, you have
then
failed,
it's not working.
right? And that goes to everybody involved. Now, what I think is different here is, and it's not unique in our history, but it is more anomalous, is the fact that you have a minority of a minority exercising majority power.
Talking about the Tea Party.
Right? You have a minority faction of a minority party shutting down the government. That's not the way this is supposed to happen, and that is actually sort of counter to the way the republic was set up. Now they're able to do it because their leadership can't stand up to them because they fear the power that they have. And you know, I wrote a column this week about how, yes, the Tea Party is the most obnoxious wing of this sort of conservative faction in our government, but some of what they're saying appeals to a lot more people than who vote for them. And so that's why they have the power that they do over their leadership. That's why Cantor and Boehner cannot get them to back down.
Because they know what the people want.
Nolan?
They know the people don't want to see this continued spending spree in Washington with no regard
People
to
don't
debt and
want
deficits.
that. That's true.
So they've got a message that resonates. I thought this was a stupid tactic because I think, you know, they made it about Obamacare. Obamacare was coming apart very nicely on its own. They were winning that argument. You had growing public pressure and public opposition. They should have let that go on and made this fight about debt and deficits in a couple weeks. They went too early. But the Tea Party is no different in its control of the Republican Party as a minority wing than the unions are over the Democrats as a minority wing. They're not also representative of the broad Democrats.
One of the differences.
Hang on one second. Go ahead, finish.
You know, ultimately, a deal is going to come out of this. You look now today, we've got for the first time in more than a decade, the deficit shrinking,
yes.
Spending shrinking. Why? Because these folks forced the deal on the sequester 2 years ago, or in 2011. And, you know, so at some point, it's, as I said, it's messy, but you do get results. It does work.
Can you really compare the Tea Party to the unions?
No. Well, first of all, you know, the Democrats are a majority party, so it's not the same thing, right? They got the most votes in the presidential election. They got the most votes in the Senate election. They got the most votes in the congressional election last year. And if not for the gerrymandering that's been done in so many states.
If my aunt had different parts, she'd be my uncle.
Well,
Steve.
But if you get the most votes, you should have the most seats.
You didn't win. You didn't win the House.
I'm talking about votes.
Hang on. Go ahead. Finish.
I'm talking about how people
works?
feel. They're a majority party, so the comparison doesn't work there. But it's also true that the unions don't threaten to shut everything down if they don't get their way. And when they do, the leadership says, hey, you know what? We're not doing that. So you got to sit down and we'll move on.
Let me ask you this, Nolan. Say we get over this hump again, and we will, you say, eventually. How hard does it make it to get other deals done? Because it feels like a lot of these relationships are on shaky ground.
Well, I mean, and they are on shaky ground, but you have to remember why we reached this point, why we're here passing a continuing resolution. This president hasn't gotten a budget in place for 5 years now. He's the first president to go a full term without having a budget in place. So we're lurching from spending crisis to spending crisis because we don't have a budget. It's the lack of leadership from the top that creates chaos in the organization. That's true in government, it's true in business, it's true in sports teams. This guy has built no relationships with Congress, and he's created this hostile, extraordinarily hostile environment.
As we start to wrap up, Stephen, let me ask you this. Are we the same in Michigan? Do we have the same kind of contentious working relationship in Lansing that they have in Washington?
Well, I mean, in Michigan right now, Republicans enjoy the kind of majority status that Democrats do at the national level, so they don't have to bargain at all with the other side in Lansing.
No, they don't.
Hang on.
Different. They control both houses
Right.
in Michigan.
They do control both
Only
houses.
one house in Congress, and you can't dismiss the fact that they
I
control the
understand.
House. You have to deal with the opposition.
understand.
All right, Stephen, you get the last word on this one.
The issue is, this is no way to run a railroad, right? Everybody agrees on that. You can't have the government shut down. We've got to move past this. I think you have to have the larger debate about what the role of government is going to be, how big the government is going to be. Democrats are winning that argument in national elections. Republicans don't like it. They're going to have to learn to sort of work together to figure out how we get forward.
Why can't we just hold hands and have a cup of coffee? All right, it's time now for headlines. All right, so it's the time of the show. We take a look at some of the other quick headlines that caught our attention this week. Nolan, what did you see?
Well, we had a report out from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Control, the UN agency that monitors global warming. And I just can't believe it wasn't a huge headline in every newspaper, because what it said was the Earth hasn't warmed in 15 years. You'd have thought everybody would have been screaming, global warming, stop. Instead, these folks came out again and says, gosh, we've all got to all go back to hunting and gathering because the Earth is burning up.
It's all going to end.
Win with these folks.
You're going to suffer the most when it gets hot. Watch.
He likes that
I want to
weather.
make sure.
82 degrees in October, I'll take it.
That's
Right.
beautiful.
It's not hotter, though.
No. All right, Stephen, what did you see?
Next week, we have a final chapter in the Kilpatrick saga.
Are you sure it's the final chapter? Because I've seen the final. It feels like the final.
This is the last frame, right?
Yeah.
The sentencing for Bobby Ferguson and Kwame Kilpatrick are scheduled for next week, and I think the number is going to be pretty eye-popping.
What do you think it's going to
What do
be?
you think?
North of 30 years, maybe.
Good Lord.
That's what the
30
prosecution
years.
recommended for Bobby Ferguson, was 30 to life. So
Mass murderers don't get that kind of thing.
Wow, there you go. And the one thing that I saw this week, I thought of you, Nolan, since you like to ride your bike around all nice nature areas, is now in the House in Lansing. They were hard at work making sure, talking about a bill that when you make a right turn signal for bike riders, you can now use your right hand. You don't have to use your left hand.
left
Aren't you
over.
glad we have
Exactly.
a full-time legislature?
Aren't you glad they're working hard for us? And that is going to do it for MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining us on our new day. You can catch us every Thursday night at 7:30 right here on Detroit Public TV. And if it's the first time that you've joined us, welcome. Make sure you check out what MiWeek is all about at MiWeek.org. We're also on Facebook and Twitter. For all of us at Detroit Public TV, I'm Christy McDonald. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next Thursday.
Business Leaders for Michigan is dedicated to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and economic growth. Learn more at businessleadersformichigan.com. Funding is also provided by Delta,